Good evening. I'm Dr. Jean Goodnow, president of Delta College. We are so happy you are with us for the first ever President's Speaker Series by way of Zoom. We are excited to be bringing this event to you as we turn the page into the next decade, year 21 of this series. Our speaker, Mara Liasson, can be heard regularly on NPR Morning Edition and All Things Considered. She is covering her 8th presidential election this year, providing extensive coverage of the candidates and issues that in this presidential race. Prior to her current assignment, Liasson was NPR's White House correspondent for all 8 years of the Clinton administration. She is a 3-time recipient of the White House Correspondents Association Miriam Smith Award and a graduate of Brown University, where she earned a bachelor's degree in American history. Tonight, we will be examining issues surrounding what some have coined the most important election of our lifetime through our students' eyes. Thank you for being with us. And here to introduce our speaker is President's Speaker Series co-chair and professor of political science, Dr. Kim Klein.
Thank you, Dr. Goodnow, and thank you for your ongoing support of the President's Speaker Series. Thanks also to the Boys Endowment Fund through the Delta College Foundation Office, as well as the Democracy Commitment for making this event possible. I would also like to recognize our Speaker Series Committee, who researches and selects our themes and speakers. Series founder, Nancy Vader McCormick, Kirk Wolf, co-chair David Baskin, Barb Hanley-Miller, Carlos McMath, Sharon Bernthal, Leanne Govitz, Lynn Lemerand, Linda Krakowski, and Heidi Helgren. We all are living through a time that potentially will reshape this country. Anchored by a pandemic, coupled with a recession, social unrest, a president who talks about the possibility of not honoring the results are all part of today's landscape. Here to shine a light on these challenging times is Mara Liasson. Her access and insight will guide us through her opening remarks and responses to a series of questions from a panel of Delta College student moderators. Following, we will watch as the table is turned and Mara transitions to moderator, posing questions related to politics, the first debate, and the upcoming election to a group of Delta College students. Our format tonight will be unique. Center stage with Mara will be our students. We are excited to be a part of this exchange. Following this portion of the presentation, there will be time for questions from the attendees submitted through the Q&A function located on the bottom of your screen. At the closing, we will show a short video created by Delta students and our high school partners. We ask that you vote for your top choice. So without delay, we're going to give a warm Delta Zoom welcome to Mara Liasson.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I can't see you, but I know you're out there, and it's really exciting and a little weird to be participating in this format. I am going to talk about politics and this election. You know, politics, because you're all very educated. You know that politics comes from the Greek word polis, which means many, and ticks, which means blood-sucking insects. But we will not dwell on the insect-like qualities of our political leaders. We'll just jump right into the 2020 elections, which are the most unusual election I have ever covered. As Kimberly said, we're experiencing 3 crises all at once. We've got a pandemic. We have a recession because the economy had to be put into a medically induced coma. We've got a whole racial reckoning going on. And now we have a fight over the Supreme Court, a Supreme Court fight that will alter the balance of power on the court for generations just a month before Election Day. And it's possible that Amy Coney Barrett will be voted on just a couple days before Election Day. One of the things that, even though this has been such a tumultuous and volatile election year, the whole Donald Trump presidency has been tumultuous and volatile. The actual electorate has been incredibly stable. You could even call them stolid. Early on in this election cycle, maybe 9 months ago, large majorities of voters told pollsters that they had made up their minds and they weren't going to change them. And it turns out they weren't kidding. They were telling the truth. This election has been incredibly stable, and I mean the horse race part of the election. Joe Biden has had a mid to high single-digit lead in the national popular vote for months. Nothing seems to change that. It doesn't seem to matter what happens, what he says, what Trump does, what Trump says. It's really just stayed extremely stable. And he's got a slightly smaller lead in the states that count. We call them the battleground. You guys are in the forefront of it. Michigan is kind of #1 battleground state. Without Michigan, Donald Trump would not have been president. And in the battleground, Joe Biden's lead has been much smaller, but it has also been steady. And up until now, you would say that Joe Biden is ahead, but Donald Trump is within striking distance. Then you've got, last week, the week before, when I was asked, what could change this dynamic? Well, there were only a very few events that could. One of them was the debates. The debate, I don't know how many of you watched that horrendous debate on Tuesday. People said, who won, who lost? We know who lost, the American people, because it was basically just a bunch of shouting and interruptions, mostly from the president. But the debates were one of the few things that could have changed this dynamic. The debate was the last big chance that Donald Trump had to change the dynamic of this race from a referendum on his leadership, which it has been all along. This election has been more about Donald Trump than it's been about Joe Biden. Just as an example, Donald Trump supporters, very excited to vote for him. Joe Biden supporters, very excited to vote against Trump, not so much to vote for Biden. Overall, voter enthusiasm is very high, but it's been all about the president, whether you like him or you hate him. And that's another feature that we haven't seen in elections past. There is only a tiny, tiny sliver of undecided voters. It's estimated between 6 and 12% of people are truly undecided, meaning their vote is really up for grabs. And only about 1/3 of them live in the states that count. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Arizona, Florida, so very tiny numbers of people. So the debate was the last chance one of the last chances that Donald Trump had to change the dynamic of the race from a referendum on him to a binary choice between him and Joe Biden. I don't know how many of you watched, but he came into the debate with a very clear strategy. He was going to interrupt, bully, dominate, try to kind of hector Joe Biden into making a mistake, losing his train of thought, revealing himself to be the caricature of Joe Biden that Donald Trump has been running against and talking about for months. Senile, old, out of it. Now, I don't think that Joe Biden turned in a great performance. He wasn't as strong or forceful or crisp as he's been in the past, but Donald Trump overplayed his hand. He was so aggressive, so shouty, wouldn't stop talking, that it seems to have backfired. Now, we don't know, it's hard to know what's happening until you see it in the rearview mirror, but we are seeing polls now where Trump is slipping a bit, and so are Republican Senate candidates. And in terms of grassroots enthusiasm, one measurement of that is small dollar donations to candidates. And Joe Biden, for all of his kind of oldness, and he's not very exciting, he's no Barack Obama, he's not really a hero of the left wing and the youth wing of the Democratic Party, but he raised $32.8 million in 1 hour on Tuesday night between 10 and 11. That's a record for the Biden campaign and a record for any campaign on Act Blue, which is the Democrats' fundraising platform. So that's a sign of enthusiasm. We also have other signs. We think this is going to be a historic turnout election. We think young voters are going to turn out in historic numbers. 18 to 29-year-olds are the worst performing citizens when it comes to voting. You guys just don't turn out, but we think that that's changing because in 2018, a midterm election, young voters, 18 to 29, turned out in the highest numbers they ever have. They still lag behind people who are 45, 55, 65, but you guys really did turn out in historic numbers, and I expect you to do the same thing this time. Another sign of enthusiasm in Wisconsin, there was a call put out for poll workers among young people. Why? We're in a pandemic. Most poll workers are retired people. They're older. They don't want to be poll workers in a pandemic. They're scared. So if you don't have poll workers, you have to close polling places. And in the areas that are hardest hit by COVID, low-income minority areas, you have to close polling places. That's separate from voter suppression, which we can talk about later. But so LeBron James and other people went on this big push to get young people to sign up to be poll workers. It's not something young people usually do. Like I said, it's usually retired people, but they needed, I think the call went out in Madison or Milwaukee, they needed 3,000 poll workers and 6,000 people applied. So that's a really good sign. So I'm kind of losing track of the time, but when it's 10 minutes, somebody can just yell at me. But one of the things that I have, so what I'm watching for now is, was Donald Trump able to change the dynamic into a binary choice? He hasn't been so far. But the other two things that he did on Tuesday that were so stunning, and one was much more important than the other. Of course, the one that's been getting most of the news coverage is the fact that he wouldn't condemn the white supremacist group, the Proud Boys. He said, stand back and stand by, which was of course taken by this extremist group, the Proud Boys, as marching orders. They said, yes, sir, we're ready. They put stand back and stand by on their logo and made shoulder patches with it. And, but the reason, now that's might be horrifying, and a lot of Republicans criticized him for it, but it's consistent with remarks he's made about white supremacists in the past. Remember Charlottesville, good people on both sides. That's when there was a neo-Nazi march in Charlottesville, ended up killing one of the counter-protesters. But what's even more stunning was that he doubled down on his refusal to commit to a peaceful transfer of power, to accept the results of the election if he doesn't win. He has said over and over again to his supporters that the only way he can lose is if it's rigged and if he's cheated, and he will not accept the results of the election unless he wins. He believes that this election will go to the Supreme Court, and because will have appointed a third of the Supreme Court justices, he expects them to rule in his favor. And he has also encouraged his voters to come out to the polls and watch. Democrats say that's voter intimidation. There are actual rules about who can be a poll watcher. This is as opposed to a poll worker. The poll worker helps you fill out the ballot. The poll watcher are people, generally, you only are allowed to have one or two from either party in a polling station or polling area to watch. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, I have said since Donald Trump was elected that Donald Trump is a stress test on democratic institutions. And for me, the whole last 4 years has been an experiment to find out how strong our democratic institutions are. And this is the final exam. This is the really big test. You know, we've seen him put pressure on the CDC, on scientists in the government to kind of you know, either downplay the virus or say masks aren't important, or to say schools should open in a certain way, or to say a vaccine is going to be just around the corner, or to say that certain drugs like hydroxychloroquine are safe. We've seen him call on the judiciary to lock up his opponents, call on federal prosecutors to prosecute his opponents. But of all the institutions in the United States, the one that I think has held up the best and is the most inspiring to me is the voters. The fact that we had in 2018 a historic turnout election. Midterm elections usually don't get very high turnout. This 2018 was the highest turnout midterm since 1914. I already told you young people broke turnout records, so did Hispanics. And that's, you know, that tells you something. Voters have been enthusiastic, energized, paying attention, going to town meetings, running for office from dog catcher to governor. We've had tremendous interest in public office. So that's all really hopeful. So how are we doing? Should I just keep blabbing here, or I'm losing track of the time. Do I have a couple more minutes, or should we turn it to questions? I'm not hearing you.
Yep, I'm gonna jump in.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay.
So we're now going to transition
Okay, great.
to our student moderators who will be asking you some questions. So
Okay.
first I would like to give special thanks to Dr. Lisa Lorson, who's the co-chair of the Democracy Commitment, for assisting with identifying and preparing the students who are going to be a part of this event. So at this time, I'm going to introduce our Delta College student moderators who each have a specific question. So we have Haley Sanborn, Leah Wendt, and Zachary Zershmeda.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
We learned that earlier.
Yes, we did. So Haley, would you go first?
Absolutely, I can go first. Can everyone hear me?
Sure can.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm glad to be a part of this. And I'm a teacher at Delta. I'm taking the class. The first question that I have for you was, what experiences have shaped your interest in politics? What got you into this? What made you passionate about following this as a career choice in your life?
Okay. Well, I was a history major, as you heard. I always was interested in politics. I'm a very old person, so I was a young person, a very young person during the 60s, but I paid a lot of attention. During the convention in 1972, I stayed up all night and watched every single night of the Democratic Convention. I was always interested in current events. I was always interested in American history. I majored in American history at Brown. And then I was always interested in writing. I started my career as a print journalist and on the Vineyard Gazette on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, a small rural paper. I moved to California and I worked for California Public Radio. At that time, this is just a silly, boring story, but I was driving across the Bay Bridge. I'd gone to California to look for a newspaper job and I couldn't find one. And I found a job at a nonprofit and I was working there and I was driving across the Bay Bridge. I turned on the radio in my car and on the radio was somebody I went to college with in my class. And he was on the radio. And I said, Michael Curtin, his name is Michael Curtin. I called the radio station. It was a Pacifica station, KPFA. It was a nonprofit community station, not an NPR station, but a community station. And I called him and I said, Michael, like, how did you get to do this? And he said, oh, we have volunteers. We'll train you. Come on over. So I did. So I learned how to do radio there. At the time, NPR was starting a bureau in San Francisco. I got hired there. Then I applied to NPR in Washington. I moved to Washington. Now, I didn't start covering politics for NPR. I started out like at the bottom of the food chain, like being a dishwasher in a restaurant. I was a newscaster, which meant I did the tiny little 5-minute hard news inserts at the top and the bottom of the hour. Or do you listen to NPR? Do you know the format? They have little 5 minutes at the top and the bottom of the hour. So I did that. Then I was the weekend duty reporter. And then I was a general assignment reporter. Then I got assigned to cover Congress under Cokie Roberts, who was a wonderful, wonderful mentor and great journalist. She passed away recently. And I covered Congress. Then, this is so boring, but you asked me the question.
It's not boring to me.
In 1992, I got assigned to cover Bill Clinton because he was running for president. And I covered him on the campaign trail and I was on the bus and we went everywhere. And sometimes in journalism, if you cover the guy who wins, you get to go be the White House reporter. Not every time, but it's because you already know all the people around him. You've developed all these contacts and so it's more useful. So I went and covered him in the White House for all 8 years of the Clinton administration, as you heard in my introduction. And then in 2000, when we had that election that never ended, remember they had the Supreme Court decided it for George W. Bush.
Yeah.
Then I stopped covering the White House and I became the national political correspondent. So I have covered politics for NPR for 20 years and I love it. To me, politics is the nonviolent way that we settle our differences, or at least it's supposed to be. And, you know, I think American democracy is probably the greatest flawed system that anyone has ever devised. It needs constant improvement, just like a garden. You've got to keep on watering it and trimming it and weeding it. But to me, you know, even though as an American citizen, a lot of what's happening now is scary and unsettling, and it's shown how fragile our institutions are. It's also filled me with hope because so many people like you, your age, are paying attention and want to do something about it and to make it better. So that's my spiel.
Yeah, and I think you're right about that, that people my age are looking to be involved in politics, you know, and get an idea for ourselves what's going on. And
yep.
I'm a history major myself, so.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm just going to change the order a bit. We're having a little bit of trouble finding Kevin. So Zach, could you go with your question? Zach?
You're muted, Zach.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay, what I was saying is my name is Zachary and I'm a student at Delta. And I wanted to thank Mara for having me, and I'm so honored to be able to meet you and ask you a question. I think this is really great, so thank you in advance. Moving forward, given President Trump's recent comment predicting that the Supreme Court will be invoked to decide the winner of the president's election, presidency election, sorry, and given the fact that he is nominating a replacement to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, does this provide President Trump with an advantage? Could you also comment on how this pick could impact voter turnout?
Okay, the short answer is he certainly hopes so. I mean, he certainly thinks so. Now, there's a lot that has to happen before the Supreme Court gets to decide this election. The Supreme Court is not supposed to decide elections. Voters decide elections, actually states decide elections, because we don't have a system that elects our presidents by national popular vote. We have a system that elects our presidents on a state-by-state, winner-take-all basis. That is something that's going to be discussed and maybe reformed in the future. We can talk about that a little later, but right now that's how it works. So before he gets to contest this and bring it all the way to the Supreme Court, it has to be close enough for him to be able to even do that. It has to not only be close in a number of states, there have to be irregularities and some kind of credible basis that he can say it was fraudulent. He's out there saying mail-in voting is fraudulent. Well, first of all, he votes by mail. Many states vote completely by mail, and there's no evidence of widespread fraud or even tiny bits of fraud. There are a couple ballots here and there that, you know, might be irregular. So first of all, the election has to be close. If it's close and there's all sorts of lawsuits, he's hired thousands and thousands of lawyers. So the Democrats, they're getting ready to contest this. For those of you who were alive in 2000, it was only one state, and the state was won by 537 votes by George W. Bush after the Supreme Court intervened. And it was really interesting. At that time in the Supreme Court ruling, they said, this should not become a precedent. It's an amazing thing. The Supreme Court, which creates precedent, right? That's what they do, said, don't use this to rely on this. In other words, don't use this to elect a Democratic president in the future. Don't use what we did. It's just a one-off thing that we're gonna give this to George W. Bush. But anyway, so a lot of things have to happen. Now, he assumes that the 6 conservative justices, 3 of whom were appointed by him, will decide the election in his favor. Absolutely. Whether they will do that is unclear to me. I expect that if they agree to take up the case at all, they probably will rule for him. Now, if he has lost the popular vote by 5 million votes, just as a thought experiment, what's that going to do to this country? I mean, how many elections can we have where the guy with the fewer votes gets to be president before you can't have a stable country? Now, the Electoral College never mattered because it never diverged from the popular vote. It always got the same result. But now we've had recently 2 elections where the Electoral College, which is the state-by-state winner-take-all system, has gone in the opposite direction of the popular vote. People, when the system is viewed as unfair by large numbers of people, that system is going to change, for better or for worse. And that's where we're at now. we're entering a big debate, and this is like a bigger than the question you asked me, but we're entering a big debate about minority rule. Minority rule is generally seen as unfair and undemocratic. In other words, it's those Middle Eastern countries where the majority of people are Shiite, but a tiny sect of Sunnis runs everything. It's just seen as unfair. So right now we have a president who got less votes than his opponent. He has now appointed 3 Supreme Court justices, confirmed by a Senate where 53 Republican senators represent fewer than 50% of Americans. Because the Senate is even less democratic than the Electoral College, because every state gets 2, no matter whether you're California with 8 million people or Wyoming with however many people they have. So I'm just giving you a heads up. You're gonna be hearing a lot about minority rule in the future.
Do you think that could impact how people are going to vote?
Yes, the other part of your question. That's an excellent question. Okay, you mean the prospect of that, how that could impact?
Right, that
yes.
he's
It's
appointed.
absolutely going to energize Democrats. Now, will it energize them enough to have the kind of result that cannot be contested because it's so overwhelming? I don't know. But I can tell you that every time Donald Trump says something or does something that energizes his own base voters, he also energizes potentially more Democrats. So the idea that he said he might not accept the results, no peaceful transfer of power, the Supreme Court will decide in my favor, all that is definitely affecting Democrats. I think the idea in his mind, he'd like it to demoralize Democrats and get them to stay home because they feel he's going to win no matter what. But that's why Joe Biden, and we can talk about the debate later, but Joe Biden at the end of the debate, remember his closing message? Vote, vote, vote. You have it in your power. He cannot just stay in office because he wants to. So that's the tension we have now. But I do believe that it will increase turnout among Democrats.
Thank you. Leah, would you like to go now? And then Kevin, we'll have you follow up with the last question, okay?
Hello, I'm Leah. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening. And my question is that many young people have found it increasingly difficult to trust the news and to know where to find a credible source. What has your experience been like in this area, working for both NPR and Fox News? And then additionally, what advice would you have for young people that are really struggling to have productive conversations with people of different backgrounds and experiences?
Those are excellent, excellent questions. And they're really, really hard to answer, especially the last one. But let me go through them. First of all, what you're really saying is, why are we so polarized? Why can't we start with a common set of facts and then work our way to opinions? Now it's like we start with the opinions and then we cherry pick some so-called facts to back them up. Okay, in terms of my experience working for NPR, okay, I work for NPR, that's my regular job. I consider NPR to be a mainstream news organization that tries to be analytic, not opinion driven. So I'm very comfortable there. I am a contributor on Fox. I have been a contributor on Fox since 1998. So I don't actually work there all day. I go there for an hour once a week and I'm on a panel. I don't say anything on Fox that I don't say on NPR. You're not going to hear me say anything different. So I've never had any pressure, any suggestions from either NPR or Fox about what I should say. They are hiring me because they trust my judgment and my analysis. However, sometimes I feel like, the whole country's polarized. The media is polarized. The joke is that MSNBC and Fox don't even cover the same natural disasters. I'm the exception that proves the rule, because I'm on Fox and NPR. The problem with news consumption now is so many people look to news for affirmation, not information. In other words, they just want to go hear a lot of people talk who agree with them. Well, that's crazy. Like, you want to be exposed to people with different opinions. Now, you asked me, how do you have a productive conversation with people with different opinions? Okay, there are probably some people that you can't have a productive conversation with. And this is something my stepdaughter showed me this text she got from some guy who said, don't you know Obama is a pedophile? Well, you probably can't have a productive conversation with that person, but there are many thoughtful liberals and thoughtful conservatives, and yes, you can have a productive conversation. The example that I always give is, it's one thing to say climate change is real. Let's agree on that. It has man-made causes. And then after we agree on the basic facts, then we can argue about what we should do about it. Somebody might say, you know what, it's not fair that the United States should have to cut back when China and India aren't doing anything. Maybe let's just get used to rising sea levels. You know, let's just adapt. We don't want to do anything that's going to cost jobs or, you know, change our lifestyle. That's legitimate, okay? Then the other side says, you know, whatever, we should get zero carbon emissions by 2050. What's not productive is to say, look, there's still snow in the winter, therefore there's no global warming. Or global warming is a Chinese hoax. That's kind of saying because they're still monkeys, that means there's no evolution. I mean, so there are people out there, if you can establish a common set of facts, you can have a productive discussion. You know, but if you can't agree on a common set of facts, it's really hard. I mean, if you start, you know, with a conspiracy theory, you know, it's really, really tough.
Thank you.
Kevin, you all set? Can you?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
All right. Well, thank you for coming to speak to us. And a little background about me. I'm from Flint, Michigan. I've lived here my whole life, and I lived through the whole water crisis and all that. So after a year after switching from the Detroit water supply to the Flint water supply, the state officials were still covering it up and weren't telling the truth about the lead poisoning in the water. So why should us people in Flint, a lot of people I know here, they do not trust the government. So why should they trust the government, and how do they make their voices heard, and how do they make sure that they can get the media attention?
First of all, you shouldn't trust the people who made those decisions that led to that horrific scandal in Flint. But you can make your voices heard. You can go and vote. You can peacefully protest. You can organize. Flint, now I don't know if you think Flint got enough media coverage, but if it wasn't for the media, nobody outside of your community would have known about Flint, right? So, you know, look at just, you know, what's happened in the last year. I mean, Black Lives Matter has made a difference. You know, people marching in the street makes a difference. I would say that violent protests generally is a big gift to the other side. You know, you want to do that, you might as well just send $100 to the people you're opposing. But you can do it by being part of the political process, which sometimes can be frustrating. And, you know, it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But the communities that have huge levels of voter turnout are the communities that get listened to and paid attention to. You know, that's why young people haven't really gotten much attention. Why should politicians pay attention to people who don't turn out and vote? Now, I think that's changing now. But historically, like, who cares? I mean, a perfect example of that is the Democratic primary. Bernie Sanders, who had tremendous support among young people, he said the way he was going to win the nomination was he was going to boost turnout among young people to tremendous levels. He already knew he was going to win them, but the problem was enough of them had to turn out to make a difference. Well, guess what? They didn't. They didn't turn out. The ones that did turn out voted by huge margins for Bernie, but there were just so few of them. So it's kind of like, you have to put your money where your mouth is. You got to go. What did Michelle Obama say? Pack a lunch. Maybe you have to pack dinner too. Take a folding chair. Go stand in line, because you're going to be standing in line for an entire day, because there are a lot of people out there who do not want you to vote. To me, the strongest argument for voting is the tens of millions of dollars the other side is paying to get you not to vote. So it must be important if they're spending all this money and effort to try to stop you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're gonna turn the tables. And yeah, Mara,
Okay.
you're gonna.
So wait, so I just throw a question out there, and then somebody will answer.
Right. So we're going to have you take the lead in the role of moderator, and we have 11 students who are going to field these questions. And I just want to briefly give you their names, because we won't have time going forward. But We have Paige, Paige Wally, Peyton Ball, Haven Young, Jocelyn Gonzalez, Carly David, Emma Spencer, Kayla Clark, Jared Nagel, Keelan Bromberg, and Brooke Pelton. And they're coached up and they're ready to go. So
Okay, so I'll just throw out a question and anybody can answer it, right?
yes.
Okay, so my first question is,
Give me a brief second while I pull everybody in.
oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
This is great, by the way, because you're the first people. I give these speeches a lot around, you know, well, in person before the pandemic, but also now on Zoom. And I do a lot of college campuses like this. Nobody has ever given me an opportunity to question the students before. You're the first ones. I think it's really great. So tell me when I can go. Are you guys ready? I only see Leah, Zach, and Kevin. Am I supposed to see more of them?
I think Eric is pulling them in right
now.
Oh, yeah.
All right, that should be everyone.
All right, I only see 3 of them, but anyway. Or maybe should I be clicking on something?
Eric, she's okay, right? Mara's okay.
I just see Leah, Zach, and Kevin at the top of the screen. Anyway, I'll just throw it out there and maybe somebody will just pop up. Okay, so here's my question. Honestly, and I'm not going to ask you if you are going to vote, those of you who are over 18, because you'll all say yes. I want to ask you, what percentage of your friends do you think are going to vote?
I'd say like 70%.
That's pretty high. You really think that it's going to be that high?
Absolutely.
Okay, and tell me what's motivating them.
Mostly anger.
That's a big motivator.
Yeah, for how they've been portrayed by certain people. I mean, I'm sure we know who I'm talking about, but anyway, yeah, mostly anger though.
So do you, and is this mostly among your friends their first presidential election?
Yeah, I'd say so.
And okay. Okay, and so anger is motivating them. What about, maybe I'll ask somebody else, what are the issues that you and your friends care the most about? That is, in other words, that you think that your presidential choice will do something about?
I feel like a lot of people that I talk to are really concerned about the rights of minorities. And that's like one of the big issues that everyone's focused on all the time.
And that would lead them to vote for which person?
Mr. Biden.
Okay.
Okay. I also think that women's rights have a lot to do with it. I think that it could definitely sway a lot of people towards Biden versus Trump in abortion laws and having healthcare that's affordable, you know.
And those are certainly the issues that the Democrats are focusing on around the Supreme Court, you know, healthcare, abortion rights. Okay, so here's my other question. A lot of polls show that there's, you know, they ask young voters opinions about capitalism and socialism. And a lot of polls show a remarkably high openness among young people to socialism. And my reaction to all those polls are, okay, what do these young people mean when they hear the word socialism? What does it mean to them? And why is it appealing? Because it's not very well defined. It could be socialism as in Venezuela. It could be socialism as in Germany or France or any of the social democracies of Europe, where there's a stronger social safety net. It's easier to afford housing, education, retirement, college. Then there's the kind of socialism where the government controls everything, you know, like Russia. I mean, so if you, I just want to hear from you guys, when you hear the word socialism, like what does it mean, and is it a positive or a negative?
Personally, for me, I think among most people that I know, we're more open to the different ideas of socialism instead of just with it. We're thinking a more equal everyone, if that makes sense. And people, I think, that are more older are just more used to capitalism and just want to stick with what is known. And I think younger people just like especially when you were saying socialism with paid for college, stuff like that, things that will benefit them personally, in my opinion and in my experience, thinking of those things more.
Going along with Paige, I completely agree. I think that they're more, they want to catch the people who slip through the cracks more than what we have now. You know what I mean?
Something I noticed was it was less of people, I guess, advocating for the destruction of capitalism among people and replacing an entire economic system. And a lot of times when I guess they mention a sort of economic shift, it's more programs to help them out, like free college or affordable health care. It's not per se in private business and all that.
Right, so it's not to get rid of the free market or private property. It's to have a stronger social safety net. And it's what we would call, for those of you who study this, social democracy. It's not socialism as in Cuba. Okay, because that's never described in these polls, you know, and I was always just curious about what people feel. So it sounds, this is the other thing I want to ask you about. You guys are, I hate to say this, but you're in a generation that's just being screwed. I mean, you are worse off than any other generation by every single metric: home ownership, wealth, income, the ability to do better than your parents, you know, the ability to move out of your parents' house. Just by every measure, you're the worse off generation economically and in terms of mobility that we've had in a really long, in modern American history. And you're coming of age just as American capitalism, after 30 years of kind of decline, has finally stopped providing broadly shared prosperity and economic mobility. In other words, that's what American capitalism used to do great. It provided broadly shared prosperity, strong middle class, and it had an escalator. If you got an education, worked hard, you would rise up. That's the American dream. So it stopped doing that. And that's part of the debate that we're having in this election, is how to make it do that again, how to make it have less income inequality, more broadly shared prosperity, and more mobility. And it means that you guys, I think, and I want to hear you talk about this, are looking to the government to help you afford basic things like healthcare, housing, retirement, and education. And the whole Republican era that we are just, I think, maybe coming out of, said, hey, the government should do as little as possible. Individuals should do things for themselves. Freedom is really important. The government is intrusive and it's suffocating. And it would be better if government didn't regulate businesses, taxed corporations and rich people much less, and let the free market, you know, work. So I'm just curious as to what you guys think about that and what you want your government to do for you. That's a kind of big question, but this is really what we're debating. When you get rid of the shouting and the insults, that's what Biden and Trump are actually debating.
I personally don't think Trump is interested in helping anybody but rich people in this country. As he said from the debate, he used tax cuts given to him, and yeah, it's upsetting.
What is it that you want your government to do? What do you expect from the government? People have rights and responsibilities. I mean, you're expected to do certain things, be a law-abiding citizen, work hard, you know, pay your taxes, etc. What do you want to get back from the government?
For me, like, one of the things I've noticed is I've seen a lot of common stories where there's a lot of people, you know, they struggle to afford rent, healthcare, education. It's not necessarily, I guess, the idea that we should go away from the idea if you work at something and reach it, but I think the government should provide some basic support so that they provide like the bare necessity we need so we can actually work towards reaching that goal that we want. Whether that be, you know, the job we are wanting or the healthcare for surgery, drugs, whatever it might be.
I think if it's like a basic human right like healthcare, everybody should start out on the same playing field, and that's where we're wrong now. That's why people are slipping through the cracks that can't go get treated for medical needs or anything like that. Like, we have to have an even playing field for everybody to start out with basic healthcare, dental, having all of these basic needs met in order to advance in life, and past that should be up to the person themselves.
Agreed.
I'm sorry. To add off of that, personally, I'm type 1 diabetic, so going through everything that's going on with the insulin crisis, I think people in the diabetic community and just people in my life that know me and know about that realize we didn't ask to have these issues. So why is it that just to survive, it is so expensive and so difficult? So I think that is instilling this idea that it's not, like someone said earlier, an equal playing field to start out.
Know what you guys haven't mentioned yet? Climate change. Where does that rank in your, I mean, somebody said that like racial justice was the most important issue, but in terms of the issues that you care about, like where does climate change fit in?
For me, it's one of the top priorities because I sort of view it as, you know, we could deal with the fixing the tax system, ending the loopholes, getting better health care, dealing with the immigration crisis. There's a bunch of issues we could deal with. But in my opinion, I've always sort of viewed it as that's all sort of useless if we have a world that has mass famine because it's hard to produce food to feed people because climate change wiped out a bunch of farms or is making areas uninhabitable for people. Where to me, at least for me, it's one of my top priorities that I'd like to see dealt with.
Now, here's another thing that I want to ask you guys about. It seems like there are not a lot of Trump voters in this group. If there are, I really want to hear from them. But there was a hashtag or something or a meme that somebody told me about that said, settle for Biden. And I thought, wow, that is really impressive. That's inspiring. Young people are saying settle for Biden instead of wah, 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 it isn't Bernie, so I'm staying home. You know, that was a sign of real maturity to like make a decision where you weren't super excited about the guy, but you understood that he was better. It's kind of like what happened in the Democratic primary where Biden had no money, he had no endorsements, he had no campaign, but all of a sudden, Democratic voters looked at Trump, who they really wanted to defeat. They looked at Bernie, they looked at Biden, they said, okay, we're gonna go with the guy we think has the best shot. And then en masse, they just moved to Biden, even though he hadn't really done anything to get their vote. He hadn't aired any ads because he didn't have any money to. But anyway, so this settle for Biden thing is really interesting to me. And I just want to hear from you guys. Are any of you excited about him? What is the reason to vote for him? What do you think about him and Kamala Harris?
I'm just going to jump in. I know I'm a moderator, but I think I do have a good piece of information. I'm actually a Republican, and I've been conservative a lot of my life, but now I'm voting for Biden. And I'm part of this movement online called Republicans for Biden. And I see a lot of this. A lot of Republicans that voted for Trump in 2016 are now going to be voting for Biden here in 2020. And I think even a lot of people would agree with me that Trump is not the face of the Republican Party. You would look at John McCain, Mitt Romney, George Bush, right? Those are the people that I associate with the Republican Party. Trump is the face of the radical right. And I think even a lot of Republicans are fed up with this because it doesn't matter what your beliefs are, the way he treats people, his demeanor, the way he carries himself, it's absolutely disgusting. And I think that is going to be the single thing that hurts him in 2020. Everything that people hate about him was played out at the debate a couple of days ago. It was like Twitter in real life. And it was amazing after I read polls and saw how many people decided they're voting for Biden based on his behavior.
I mean, based on Tuesday night.
Tuesday night, but Trump's behavior at
Yes.
the debate.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Based on his
I mean,
behavior.
he acted like a baby. I mean, it was horrifying. If our president acts like that to the American people, how do you think he's going to do anything else?
Yeah.
So I just kind of wanted to put that out there that, you know, there are people that are Trump supporters or were changing.
Yep, and that's why Biden is doing better in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. That's what's changed. In other words, those people. Yeah. So really, really interesting. Anybody else have some comments about Biden or?
Like for me, I guess I was one of the small group of people, you know, the Sanders, Warren, most of their supporters were party youth. I was one of the small exceptions where I had been supporting Biden all the way back since April 2019 when he first announced his campaign. So I've always, in general, been excited for him. And you said also, you mentioned Kamala Harris. For me, I never really per se cared who he picked for vice president. I was basically always going to be behind him from the very beginning. So I didn't really care who he picked.
So who is there anyone among you guys that is settling for Biden? And what's that like? Talk about that process. Like, obviously you were for what, Bernie or Elizabeth Warren in the primaries, or?
Me personally, I became more involved, you know, once I turned 18 and it set in, I'm going to vote soon, because I turned 18 over when we were in the middle of quarantine. So that's when I started really buckling down and paying attention and realized that at that point it was Trump or Biden, and I had to, you know, just judge based off. I'm not personally super politically like party affiliated or anything like that, and I just took the last 4 years into consideration for the most part. And I was actually talking to a friend about this who does not share a lot of my beliefs, and I expressed my opinion to her that if we're looking back on the last 4 years, if we re-elect Trump, we're going to get 4 more years of that. And if we were to elect Biden instead, and as you said, settle for him, there's new opportunities, in my opinion, if that makes sense.
What kind of opportunities?
Just more, in my opinion, having a president that is more of a politician, just more politically educated, and plus, you know, now that I've more book about everything, I've seen that I've been thought out plans for.
So I work with people who are mentally and physically disabled. That's what I do. And ethically speaking, I feel like Trump has no compassion towards that group whatsoever, considering he mocked a disabled reporter while he feel like my group of people, as someone who also has depression and anxiety that somehow fits in there, but you know, it's just really upsetting that someone would just, not even minority wise, in like a racial way, just like cut out so many people from their point of view and just completely disregard everyone as long as it has no like gain for them. And that's why I'm voting for Biden instead.
But who are you for in the primary?
I wanted Yang in the beginning.
Oh.
I was very upset.
But the thing about the Democratic Party this year, you know, the old joke is, I don't belong to an organized party, I'm a Democrat. Ha ha ha. Democrats have been the most unified they've ever been of any election I've ever covered. And a sign of a mature party is where you put aside your differences and then you come together to win the election, and then you fight out other kind of family squabbles later. And you know what Zach was talking about in terms of Republicans for Biden, Biden does not represent the kind of future of the Democratic Party or the like young, vigorous future leaders of the party. He's himself said, I'm a transitional figure. I'm just going to be there to like be a bridge to the younger generation of Democrats. But he does represent a kind of centrism that used to be found in the Republican Party, and Trump obliterated it. So the thing about American politics, like all American life, social media and everything else, is that we're so polarized. The Republican Party moved very far to the right. The Democratic Party moved to the left, but not as fast or as far. And it left this huge abyss in the middle. Now, in the old days, there used to be overlaps between the party. In other words, there were some moderate Republicans who were actually more liberal than some conservative Democrats. There was an overlap. Both parties were coalitions. They weren't these monolithic, homogenous things on either extreme. They overlapped at the 50-yard lines. That's where compromises got made in Congress. That's how you govern, by having some kind of overlap. And that's, I think, what Biden represents to a lot of people. You know, he's always mocked for saying, oh, I think I could get along with Republicans in Congress. You know, people say, what an idiot. You know, you can't do that. Look at Mitch McConnell. Okay, maybe you can't. Maybe only 40 years ago when Biden was a young senator, you could. But as a political message to tell people you want to work across the aisle, that's a great message, because most people actually want that. Most people want both parties to work together to find solutions to big problems. And that's why Biden, even though he's old and shows his age and is kind of a fuddy-duddy, you know, that's what he's offering. And a lot of Americans would like to have some of that.
If I, oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to cut in here. And I just want to thank all of you. You
guys were great.
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome.
We're awesome.
Yeah.
Really, I'm really saying this. I mean, I've done a lot of these. You guys were top notch.
Thank you. Okay, so I would, we have questions, Mara, that came from the Q&A function that the attendees had.
Okay.
And so I was going to ask Dr. Dave Baskin, who's the co-chair of the President Speaker Series, to ask those two questions to you.
Okay. I'm just going to put in one earpiece here.
Okay.
Okay. Hello?
Yeah. Dave, are you ready?
Oh, he's not talking. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. I'm hearing Kimberly. I'm not hearing Dave.
Yeah.
Oh.
Uh-oh. Oh, there he is. There we go.
Okay, let me unmute. Hello again, Mara. And I wanted to thank the students also for all those great comments. But a couple of quick questions for you. So first, Mara, you had mentioned earlier that a lot of people have already been Team Trump or Team Biden for quite a while, and that hasn't changed. So what do you see as some of the most critical issues for the swing voters who have not yet decided?
Well, here's what I think some swing voters were waiting for, is that either soft Biden supporters or people who are truly undecided wanted to see the debates. They wanted to see if Joe Biden was up to the job. You know, was he going to come out and look kind of senile like the president keeps on telling us he is, or would he look presidential? So that's one thing that will matter to them. In terms of other issues, I don't think it's about issues anymore. First of all, we're too close to an election. These two men are so polar opposite on so many issues that if you are deciding, like, you know, who you'd rather have to pick Supreme Court justices, it's like, that makes no sense because there's nothing to compare. I mean, one is very conservative and one is going to pick justices to, you know, uphold Roe or something like that. So I think it's more about personalities, demeanor. Who do you feel will keep you safe from the pandemic? Who do you think will help you help the economy recover? And also, who do you want like in your living room, we used to say on the TV set, now it's like on your phone. Who do you want in your face for 4 years? You know, do you want Trump? Some people find the Trump show very entertaining. Many more people find the Trump show very exhausting. You know, Joe Biden represents a kind of return to normalcy, where Americans don't have to be like checking their Twitter feed 50 times a day to see what outrageous thing the president of the United States said. Is he going to accept the election results? Is he going to, you know, start a war with North Korea? Is he going to, you know, whatever. So I think that's it's about temperament, personality, you know, who you want in your life for 4 years and who will keep you and your family safe and prosperous. That's what it comes down to.
Thank you. Yeah, there was another question that we received also. Someone was wondering, what do you see as the key issue or maybe the key issues for whoever is next elected president?
Oh, okay. First of all, to come into office in this moment is just overwhelming. We've got a pandemic. We probably won't have a widely distributed vaccine till the spring. You've got a devastated economy. One thing the pandemic did, I mean, I think once we get a vaccine, a lot of the economy will bounce back, but the pandemic has been like a brutal X-ray on the American economy. And it revealed things we already knew were happening. Huge inequalities. You know, some people are doing great. When you look at that graph of the 4 quarters of the American economy, the 25% highest earners, then the next and the next and the next, and how they fared during the pandemic, the guys 25% top of the economy really didn't change their incomes at all. They're just kind of the same. They did dip a little, but they've come back. But everybody else who's below them, way down. So that's a huge problem. I mentioned it before. How do you get the American economy to start producing broadly shared prosperity and economic mobility? Maybe it's about making the tax system fairer. Why should a billionaire pay a lower tax rate than a secretary? We've seen these frontline workers go to work to basically keep the economy going, keep the healthcare system going. They're among the worst paid people in American society, and the majority of them are minorities. So there's a racial equity piece. There's a fixing the inequalities in the economy. There's climate change. So many problems that the next president is going to face. It's just, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. It's a challenging job for anyone. We have another person in the Q&A who was wondering what you make of the polls. We know that in 2016, a lot of the pollsters were claiming that it was going to be a Clinton victory. And while she did win the popular vote, she did not win the electoral vote. So how do you feel about polling and how that all shakes out?
Okay.
And how it affects people's voting?
Pollsters were not predicting. What they were saying is if the election were held today, we think this is what would happen. What happened at the end of the 2016 campaign was that there were a large number of undecided voters. And this group of voters generally didn't like either Trump or Hillary Clinton, but they broke 2/3 for Trump. Give him a chance. He's a businessman. I can't stand Hillary, whatever. Also, pollsters in 2016, even though they got the national polls right, she was leading by pretty much exactly, she was leading in the polls by pretty much exactly what she won by nationally. But we don't elect our presidents nationally, as I keep on saying. In Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, the people who did those polls have had a lot of explaining to do in the last 4 years. Now, what they say they've done is that they've corrected their models. They feel that last time they undercounted or underpolled white non-college voters. One of the things about polling, which is an art, not a science, is since you can't poll everyone, you have to take 300 or 400 or 500 or 1,000 people and have that group of people reflect who you think the electorate's going to be. So you have to decide, do you think African Americans are going to turn out in large numbers? Do you think they're going to be 20% of the electorate, 10% of the electorate? White non-college, what percentage of the electorate? So clearly in 2016, they underestimated how many white non-college voters would turn out, especially in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. They say, pollsters will tell you today they've corrected for that. Also, the difference between these polls and last 2016's polls, 2016 was extremely close in the polls. I don't think Hillary ever had much of a lead at the end. But by this year, the remarkable thing about the polls is they've all been consistent, and the lead that Biden has had has been remarkably stable. Now, anything could happen. I think Trump is still within striking distance, but it's a whole different polling picture than last time.
And Kim, do we have time for another question, or how are we doing on time?
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I think, Mara, unless I think we're.
That's totally your call.
Well, that's going to be an easy one, Mara. Dave, fire away. We got one more.
We got a bunch.
Thank you.
We'll have you as long as you want to stay, Mara. We're really enjoying the conversation.
I'm not sure. When were we supposed to end?
We're about one more.
Okay.
I'll
okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we did have some people who were questioning the role of the media in all this. And I know one of the students asked, like, who do you trust? And one of the questions that's coming up here in the Q&A is, how has the media withstood the constant criticism and the charges of fake news?
Okay,
So,
and
we're
the enemy of the people, and okay. So I would say that the press has held up fine. It's not nice to be called the enemy of the people. It's a little scary when you go to one of these Trump rallies and you see guys wearing t-shirts that say, rope, tree, journalist, some assembly required. Not so great. But I would say that the mainstream media has continued to do its job. There's been tremendous amount of investigative journalism. We wouldn't know that Trump only paid $750 in federal income taxes if we didn't have journalism. And I do think that there is a lot of opinion journalism. The media is polarized. We now, because of cable news and the end of the fairness doctrine, we have, Fox and we have MSNBC. But I would say that, most reporters I know are working hard and doing their jobs and trying to provide straightforward down the middle analysis. Now, it's hard when you go to a rally and Trump says, gee, I would like to punch that protester in the face. Does that mean that me, as an objective journalist, should go out and interview a professor who's for punching protesters in the face and then interview another professor who's anti-punching protesters in the face? That's just ridiculous. When things go against the basic norms of democracy, like inciting violence, we have to say that's the case. At the same time, there's no doubt that majority of people who work in mainstream news organization newsrooms are probably more Democratic than Republican. That's just a fact. But, as Zach represents, there are also plenty of Republicans to interview about Donald Trump that are not just, Trump supporters. So the point is to get a lot of points of view, a lot of voices into your stories. And I think the media is trying to do that and doing a pretty good job.
Okay. So this is going to conclude this portion of our event. And I just want to say, whew, what an evening. We've covered a lot of ground. I really want to extend a huge thank you to you, Mara, for leading us tonight, and our student leaders who really challenged themselves to kind of step out of their comfort zone and do this with us. And I think it made it a very special night that we're not going to forget anytime soon. So I wish that we could give you this huge round of applause. I know I can hear it. I can hear it. But we'll definitely see you on the airwaves, Mara.
Well, applause
so
to you too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so they're gonna head on out, and for the rest of us that are here, what I would like to say is, as part of the democracy commitment at Delta College, we have 2 upcoming events that you don't want to miss, and I want to give a quick plug. On October 15th, we'll be hosting a Now That's Debatable. That's the topic, which will be addressing race, education, politics, and pop culture. And then on October 20th, we're going to be conducting a dialogue on your constitutional right to protest. So just stay tuned for some further information. Now, if you remember at the very beginning, I talked about we're going to have a short video to share with you. And this is a joint effort between Delta College students and some of our high school partners. So following the completion of the video, there's going to be 2 polls, and we would like you to just make a choice on which video maybe spoke to you, or that you were, maybe you're loyal to, maybe it's your high school, but whatever. But again, I want to thank everybody for your willingness and the time commitment that you made to be with us this evening. And none of this happens without all of you. So I would like Eric to go ahead and play the video, and then the rest of us will leave and go to the other room. But Eric, if you could play the video now, that would be great.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever you are watching this, hello. My name is Shelby Vaughn, representing Arthur Hill High School, and I come to you with a small quote of hope. Well, while in the midst of pandemic and everything else surrounding 2020, I'm pretty sure some people have been feeling down or alone, but I want you to know that it's okay. It's okay to feel this way. It's okay, and other people feel this way too. I have a quote for you. Unity is strength. When teamwork and collaboration is present, wonderful things can be achieved. This means just stay together, stay united, stay with your friends, work together, collaborate, do everything you have to do to feel good. The world is hard. It's going to be hard, and you need someone to help you out. That's it. Bye.
Are you tired of feeling out of control? Are you fed up with the status quo? Do you wish things were different? Did you know that you can create change? Young people have always been on the cutting edge of progress. Vote this November. Make your voice heard. Our world, our voice.
What is unity? The bonding of humanity is our strength in unity. Alone, we can do so little.
Together we can do so much.
We, the people, gonna stand our ground. We, the people, ain't backing down. We, the people, gonna win with love. We, the people, never giving up. Oh no.
When I am old enough, I will participate as a citizen of democracy to vote when it is election year.
I will also participate by trying to understand what is going on in the world and the democracy. This is how I will do my part.
Be an American, where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me, and I gladly stand up.
Equality means everybody gets the same opportunity.
All right, if you're eligible to vote, you better vote because you want the right person in office.
Every vote is important, and it can be you that makes the difference.
Citizen participation includes groups and formal organizations, such like meetings and technical assistance. It is important because citizens make the future of the country. It's a process where private individuals has an opportunity to influence public.
The people that we elect and the decisions that they make is going to impact our future, not the old people's future.
I also think it's important to vote because then we feel like we have a hand in our democracy and it's our civil duty to cast our vote.
In a school survey, 50% of students said they were not active in politics and 40% did not know the presidential candidates' agendas. Students are the future of our country and government. It's time to get informed. For more information, follow political news and updates on Instagram.
It's Josie. I am currently enrolled in the political science class at Delta College, and if you haven't already, make sure you go follow our Instagram page at Phones Down for Change. Me and 2 other students are really big into putting our phones down and using our voices to get change in the world. If you want to see change, it doesn't start at social media. We believe that you should put your phone down and go out and socialize your beliefs and the change that you want to see in the world. So in these next couple of clips, I pulled out some students from the current government class here at Reese High School, and a couple of these students just have some things to say, along with their name and what grade they're in.
Hi everyone, my name is Katie Childers. I'm a senior here at Reese High School, and phone down, voices out.
Hi, I'm Haley Cedar from Reese High School, and I believe we should say less and do more. Hi, I'm Jamie Hubberg from Reese High School, and I believe we should put our phones down for a change.